what's the core of your community strategy? It's just our values. It's like, and I think that's a big part. One of my learnings is in the old world, you have your company and you have your like a wall, and then you've got your customers, right? And I think like modern business and community is all about breaking that wall, right? So the values of our company are kind of the values of our community, right? We're all kind of like transparent, and our community all knows our value. Literally, they know our company values. They talk about them because we talk about them, and I talk about them in the keynote at our Pulse conference. And I talk about, why the values matter to me and why I think they matter to customer success. And I think the more you can make it very integrated, so the way you are in your company and the way you are with your customers and your community don't feel like different things. They're all one and the same.
Hey everyone, I'm Joel Premack, host of the Community-Led Growth Show. Today I'm joined by Nick Mehta, CEO at Gainsight. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Nick.
Thanks, Joel. Great to see you.
Likewise. Well, let's start off with an easy question here. Can you give everyone a quick 30-second intro about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So it's great to have this conversation. I'm Nick Mehta, CEO of Gainsight. Gainsight, we're all about helping companies drive more growth from their existing customers. Companies spend a lot of time getting new customers, marketing to them, selling to them, but then in many cases they underinvest in their existing customers. And what happens? Customers leave you unexpectedly. Other customers could be buying more from you, and you miss opportunities. And some of your customers can be your best advocates to get new customers. And we're all about driving growth in the most durable, efficient way, which is through your existing customers.
I love that. Well, glad to have you on the show, and I love your mission, so thank you. Diving into more of the meat of today's conversation and just kind of jumping right into it, we're going to start this off with, why did Gainsight lean into community as a lever for growth from the very beginning? Yeah,
so we've been a community-led growth company before that was even a thing, which is funny. We launched the company in 2013. And I would say we leaned into community basically out of necessity. And here's why. When we started, our vision was, okay, as companies move to SaaS and cloud-based business models, as they move to like models where the customer has all the power, it's going to force them to say, we can't just focus on new customers and sales and marketing. We got to make sure our existing customers have been onboarded properly, that they're adopting our products well, they're getting value so that they're going to stay with me, grow, spend more money, and be better advocates, right? People call that whole thing customer success. And when we launched the company in 2013, customer success wasn't as obvious as it is now. Today, 100% of SaaS companies do customer success. When we launched, there was literally probably maybe 500 or 1,000 CSMs in the world. I don't mean companies doing CSM. I mean people in customer success. And we were building software for customer success. So we had a basic TAM problem, addressable market problem. We had to make our TAM. We had to convince people not just to buy Gainsight software, but actually they should focus on customer success. They should take it seriously. They should hire CSMs. And so what we did was we said, gosh, all these people in this customer success profession, right now they feel alone, like they're on their own in their companies, advocating for customer retention and customer adoption, and feeling like they're the only one, and like everyone else thinks they're weird inside their company. And we started hosting small events. I remember we had in the very beginning of 2013, a little like happy hour at our office, our tiny little office, 3,000 square foot office. We get the grocery store like cheese tray and like the box wine and but all these people showed up, right? Even though it was the box wine and the grocery store cheese tray. And so we said, gosh, these people want a community. They feel like they're on their own right now, and they come to our events and they feel like they're a little bit less alone. And that phrase of a little bit less alone, from the first event in 2013 to our first big conference we called Pulse in 2013 with 300 people, to then all those Pulse events for the year, culminating in our biggest, most recent in-person event, which was back in 2019 in Moscone Center in San Francisco with 6,000 people, to our virtual events with 20,000 people. It's the same concept of people feeling like they're finally with their tribe. They're finally with their people. And for us, we got this opportunity to be the host of this community. Right now, when I'm talking about community, initially it's just an offline, in-person, old school community, right? I'll tell you more about what we learned. But that's how we got started, was helping to bring together this customer success community and help them share their magic and grow. And today, from that, 500 or 1,000 CSMs in the world, there's probably 300,000 CSMs today. And we're not the ones that created that, but we've definitely been the hosts. So we're very proud to have been a part of it.
Awesome. That's great to hear. And I love that you guys were really building community from the beginning to solve an total addressable market problem. I think that that's
Right.
such a unique experience to go through. And I know of only one other company that actually grows their TAM through community. So that's really cool. So
Who's
thank
the
you.
other company so I can go talk to them and get commiserate?
Outreach.
Outreach,
I
exactly. It's funny. So I mean, I know Manny, the CEO there very well.
yeah,
And yeah, I think that's exactly right. Companies like Outreach, very, very similar, right? We're trying to evangelize something new. Yeah.
exactly. I had Scott Barker on the show, if you're familiar with him, and he spoke about it. And the way that they kind of talk about it is they've created this persona of a revenue innovator.
Oh,
And so they
interesting.
know that when they talk about that kind of persona, that as part of their life cycle and journey, becoming more of that modern leading
Yeah.
salesperson, sales company, they know that technology is going to be a step in that process, not just all the education and enablement and training, but that
Yes.
technology is going to be one little slice of that. And so right there is where it makes sense for Outreach and Sales Hacker, by way, to
Yep.
have this community, because they know that one slice, and hopefully that one slice then connects them back to Outreach.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's a perfect example. That's when I talk to people about creating a category, I always say creating a category starts with the community. It starts with the people, and then your technology can maybe come along for the ride, but you got to start with the people first.
Changing hearts and minds.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, so we've now heard about how community at Gainsight started. How has it evolved over the years? And what's the role of community at Gainsight today?
Yeah. So community has evolved so much in that a couple things have happened. Number one, obviously it's grown. I mentioned the statistics, Joel, about how much our Pulse community has grown, right? It's gotten global, right? We have a Pulse in London, and we've done one in Sydney, and we're doing kind of syndicated events in Japan, and we've done regional events for Pulse and all that. So it's grown, just physically, geographically. It's also grown beyond just us. I think that's a big part of community. Is it's not just the communities you host, it's the ones you influence or the ones you inspire. And there's like hundreds of customer success groups on, in the world, right? And so we don't have to do them all anymore, right? But it's important to know there's communities bigger than just your company. And then, as you know, all these communities, naturally, they want to have different modalities, right? Not just, these big events and conferences, but, we host hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of happy hours. We do an executive forum with like just a couple hundred senior executives. People love that. Break people up into roundtables, just talk about themselves. Don't talk about technology or anything else. And then it's gone into sort of digital, digital is like, not just us. There's multiple digital communities for customer success. We host one on our website called Game Changers. There's other ones out there. And so it's kind of going into so many different ways. And that's why when I think of the word community, you have to think very expansively. It's just about how are people connecting together. And that could be anything from a huge conference to a website to, Slack to a small dinner, right? Anything in between.
Exactly. And I would just also say, for a little plug, I'm actually a member of a community you guys are involved with, Pavilion.
Oh, Pavilion. That's another one.
Yep.
We love Pavilion. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
glad to be part of it.
Yeah. And I actually just had a conversation with Aaron, leader over there, on the show.
Awesome.
So
Great.
small world. Yeah.
Totally.
Um, so now that we've heard about how community is today at Gainsight and how it's evolved some over the years, I'm really curious to hear more about how you, from the CEO seat, essentially, have made sure that there's alignment across the departments of Gainsight in their role within community. Because at various companies, it can be a cross-functional thing, or it can be solely owned by one department. So I'd love to hear and explore that at
Yeah. And
Gainsight.
I would say all these things, everything I ever say is always, we're all work in progresses, right? So we're constantly iterating on this, right? And what is community? What are we talking about? If the description I had of like all the different things, it clearly touches the whole company. But let me break it down in a couple different pieces, right? So we have the events that we do, that we host, right? So those are pretty big. They're under the brand Pulse. And that's everything from the big Pulse conference to Pulse in EMEA and in Europe. There's, Pulse CXO Summit, which is kind of an executive summit, right? So those are run by our events team, but they know they know and they actually live the philosophy that I have, which is this is not a corporate event. It's a community event. It's not about Gainsight. It's about getting people together. And we have a very long list of things we've learned over the years on everything from icebreakers to get people connected together, making sure the community is very diverse from different perspectives, making sure it's not just presentations, but lots of networking, bringing in one of our values of our company is childlike joy, bring the kid in you to work every day, bringing that into the community events with karaoke and all kinds of other silly things that we do. And so, we do promotional, funny parody videos. And so there's sort of community as it shows up in formal events, right? And, we kind of infuse community into our events, frankly, not infuse it. Our events are about community and our events team kind of knows that. So I think part of this is like, how do you get the spirit of community into every team in your company? Kind of continuing on, we do all these small kind of, happy hours and dinners and virtual happy hours, right? And those are often run by everyone from like my executive assistant to like our field marketing team, which is a different team. And so they're, these are like 10, 12 person, right? Either a dinner or a Zoom or whatever. But again, still trying to bring that spirit of childlike joy and connection. We always have an icebreaker question to start to make people like open up first. We some of those like small events will have like really fun things. Like we had a Peloton instructor recently. I don't know if you do Peloton, but Tunde, who's amazing. We had her on there. We had Rebecca, who's one of the characters in Ted Lasso on one, and just bringing them in and really humanizing all this stuff that looks like marketing, but it's really about people connecting with each other. And it's really making sure people get a chance to talk to each other, having good topics, good hosting. So that's another kind of community, right? These small groups. And I do that in person in dinners and all that. So we've learned really like a lot about moderation and hosting, which is part of community, right? Like, how do you get everyone to be able to speak up? You're doing a 12-person Zoom event. How do you make it so everyone has a chance to say something? How do you say, what do you think, Susan? Like, especially for the people that are a little more shy or quiet, how do you use Zoom chat to get people to speak up? So that's a different kind of community, right? A third kind of community would be your pure online, but owned community, meaning like your own forums or whatever, right? So we use a technology called Insighted for our community, which is actually a company we then end up buying. So now it's Gainsight Insighted. And so we have our Game Changers community. And so we have a community team that runs that Game Changers community. And this is your classic forum where our top power customers are talking to each other, sharing best practices with some of the newer customers, and super active. And we have points and badges, all the kind of traditional online community stuff, right? Then we've got, third-party communities. Like there's a big Slack group for Gainsight people. And, we've got people on our team who are part of that. And we've got this person on our company named Seth Wiley. And he's a champion of his job full-time is championing a very specific community that's important to Gainsight, which is what's called the customer success operations role. Those are the people that are kind of scaling and managing the process of customer success and also implementing software like Gainsight. And so that customer success operations community has become its own sub-community. That's another thing that could happen to your companies. You might have a big community and then like sub-communities within that over time, right? We've got our community in Europe, and there's our European events team runs that. And that's kind of a different vibe because, cultures are different from city to city, country to country, right? So anyways, the net of it is you can see communities there's so many more. Each of our customer success teams, they create little communities within their sub team of all their customers, and they do group events together. And so I think you got to at least from my perspective, if you care about community, you might start with like a team working on it or, but then eventually you're like, look, we have a set of standards that are aligned around our values and culture. We actually have documented some of those. And then we basically have every team and every group trying to implement it in their own creative way that fits their customers, fits their region, fits their philosophy, but still aligns to our values.
I love that. That's a great way to bring that alignment across the organization is back to something higher around the values. I love
values.
That.
Yeah. So for us, honestly, when people say, what's the core of your community strategy? It's just our values. It's like, and I think that's a big part. One of my learnings is in the old world, you have your company and you have your like a wall, and then you've got your customers, right? And I think like modern business and community is all about breaking that wall, right? So the values of our company are kind of the values of our community, right? We're all kind of like transparent, and our community all knows our value. Literally, they know our company values. They talk about them because we talk about them, and I talk about them in the keynote at our Pulse conference. And I talk about, why the values matter to me and why I think they matter to customer success. And I think the more you can make it very integrated, so the way you are in your company and the way you are with your customers and your community don't feel like different things. They're all one and the same.
Awesome. So we're going to take a little bit of a step back and talk about how does, I guess, really you and the rest of the C-suite team at Gainsight get buy-in from your board and Vista Equity Partners that community is a good investment for the company, and how you all show ROI of your community efforts to them?
This is a really hard one, Joel, and I empathize with people that don't do it from the beginning. So if you're an early stage startup, I just say you have to do it from the beginning, because frankly, in the beginning, you get to do things not based on ROI, just based on what it is. So Gainsight community is part of who we are. So it's kind of like saying, what's the ROI of building my software? Like, I don't know, why should we have an engineering team? Nobody ever asked that, right? Like if you're a software company, nobody, but when Gainsight started, it was like, oh yeah, we're a community company and a software company. And so therefore it's not like an ROI from a fundamental perspective, because it is who we are. And everyone knows that. Now you still have to like figure out the incremental ROI. Should we make the conference a little bigger? Should we launch something new, et cetera, et cetera? Over time, you can do some studies, right? You can certainly start doing things like, hey, the people that are attending these community events are part of the community. Are they more likely to buy? Are they adopting your software more? Are they renewing at a higher rate? It's always going to be correlation. You don't know if it's because of that or something else. But you know what? If you were attentive enough and you talk to your customers, you'll probably realize like the whole thing is about community. And my belief in most businesses now, customers are buying from a vendor, not just because of the technology widgets, but really because they believe the vendor and them are part of something. Like they both believe in something. They're part of a movement, kind of like you talked about the outreach, right? You're part of a movement. And I think that's like fundamental to your value proposition to your customers, or at least I could say it is for us. So I think it's a little harder if your company has been like going the traditional sales and marketing route forever, and now you're trying to launch community, because it's a little more challenging. But I think that one thing to think about when you think about that community is you're building an asset. You're building an asset that may not pay off immediately, but over time it is a flywheel, because 100% of the people that buy Gainsight have been part of our community, coming to our events, using Gainsight before, doing it again, like 100%, not like 20% or whatever. Sure, maybe they watched a webinar, they clicked on a Google ad, but the main thing is they're part of the community. And so what I would recommend is, if you're in the beginning, do it from the beginning, so you don't have to worry about this. If you're not, start, I would say, with kind of community to solve maybe a very specific problem in your business. Maybe your problem is adoption. Maybe your problem is selling a new product or reaching a new role, and try to make it very focused, and then you can expand it over time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was really awesome to hear. And just like a lot in there to really unpack. But we are going to zoom out even further for our next question, which is, what relationship or insights did you and the rest of the Gainsight leadership team see that gave you all the confidence to then move forward with acquiring Insight?
Yes. So there was a few different things that drove this. Okay. So number one is, I think that inherently, if you're a company that uses a technology and then thinks about buying that company, it's always nice, because you're like, oh, we know it, we use it, and it's very effective, and it was awesome technology. So that's one, right? Just like, okay, we use a product. Number two, a lot of our top customers used it, right? So Gong, who's the very hot call recording software company, Visibo, which does like events, Miro, which is really hot, like whiteboarding, virtual whiteboarding. They all use this time. I mean, a big chunk of our clients used it. So we're like, oh, great. But then more strategically, when we talked to our customers about their challenges, right? So what their challenges, what were the challenges they had? One challenge was scaling customer success, right? It was like, how do I drive success for more of my customers without having like 1,000 CSMs? And part of the answer was, well, why don't I have my customers help each other, right? Like that's community, right? And you also know, Joel, that like, it's one thing when a vendor says, here's my best practice on how to use my product. It's another thing when a customer of the vendor tells another customer. And I think it's a little more credible when you hear from another customer. So part of it was our customers are saying, we want to scale customer success. Gainsight, that's your value proposition. But one of the biggest ways we can do it is community. And many of them were using Inside It. So we're like, okay, this is a real need our customers have. It integrates with our kind of overall value proposition. It fits in with us. So we used it. Our customers used it. It fit in our core value proposition. And then probably most importantly, we knew that community was at the heart of what we do. Like we went back to the beginning of this interview, right? Community is how we got started. We're a community-led company. We didn't use that terminology, but that's just who we are. And so we knew that like, if anyone's going to be good at this, it's us, right? Like I care so much about communities, you can tell, right, from this interview. And so generally speaking, I think companies do well on things that they care about. They don't do well when they buy things or get into things they don't care about. Gainsight cares a lot about community and we're good at it. And so those four things, we use the product, our customers use the product, it fit a core value prop our customers wanted from us, and we really cared about it and are good at it. That's why we got into it.
I love that. And I also think you're absolutely spot on about how when you have another customer helping a separate customer really solve a problem, it adds not just that level of credibility, but also there's an element of social proof of this person seeing success by doing it this way, and not just like, oh, here's a helpful tip on X, Y, Z. It's an actual something like tactical that has a real impact.
And it's also, I think, one thing that happens is no matter how good you are as a vendor at like really understanding your customers and, trying to communicate with them, it's just the words that customers use with each other are a little more actionable, like you're just saying, right? More tangible, versus the vendor speak we all have, right? Like the way I describe Gainsight's great, but I think the way that one of our customers would describe Gainsight to another customer would be even more relatable.
I definitely understand that point for sure. So you mentioned earlier on the interview, Peloton. We're going to talk a little bit about Peloton now. So what has Peloton, a B2C company, taught you and or done well, in your opinion, in their efforts to build community?
Okay, so first of all, I say advertise, kind of caveat up front. I am totally an obsessed Peloton, one of those annoying Peloton people who I just do it every day and I talk about it. I love all my coaches, Cody Rigsby and Ali Love and everyone else, right? So obviously I'm a super fan. But when since I've used it for a long time, I have thought a lot about the parallels, right? And so if you think about Peloton as being a business that has this hardcore committed group of customers, right? Put aside whatever recent stock price challenges they had, there's no doubt that Peloton customers are like the biggest super fans ever, right? Why is that? And I'd argue there's three things that Peloton does that are kind of like the three ingredients of a modern business that customers love. Okay, so thing number one is they have these incredible coaches that are they're so creative. They have expertise. They're like they really inspire you. And you can think of them like the world's greatest CSMs, right? Like they really are like customer success managers, except instead of customer success, it's kind of like fitness success, right? So all these coaches even if you haven't used the product, these people are the instructors teaching you, right? And even whatever kind of instruction you've gone through, like customer success management is basically just like teachers, right? They're trying to inspire you to do something. So that's number one. You have these great coaches, these CSMs. Number two, they built this amazing digitally instrumented product where they're tracking everything you're doing and they're using that data to help drive a better experience for you, help you use it better. And that shows up in everything from like recommended songs, or here's a ride you might like, or, here's the number of days in a row you've been riding or whatever, right? Like all that kind of cool data, right? And then number three is the community, right? So, when you work out on your own at home before, I'm sure there were some people who do it, but it's basically like super lonely. I know people who do that, but they're in their garage and they're just like working on their own on a bike or a treadmill or with weights, and they're just there on their own. That's cool, by the way. Some people love that. But there's a reason people go to gyms and spin classes and stuff like that. It's the feeling of community. And Peloton and now many other equipment makers, Tonal and lots of companies have kind of created this feeling of like, wow, you don't feel like you're alone because you've got that leaderboard of all the people there and you can see your hashtag of other friends of yours that are riding and people give you high fives and all that. And genuinely, I mean, I do it every single day. It really feels in a strange way like you're with that instructor and you're with the other people and you're on there and you just do it more. And I think that combination of this great coach using data to personalize the experience and then a community drives better habits and more usage and more value. Honestly, I got a lot more fit through Peloton because of that, right? And so I think it's just a really good analogy for what all of us are trying to do in our businesses, where we have great people working with our customers and CSMs and salespeople. We built a great product that's very data oriented and personalized based on the experience of that user. And then we built a community to help reinforce and drive the best habits possible.
Awesome. Well, I have one kind of like addition to this that just kind of clicked in my head, which
Yeah,
is for the coaches. In addition to being a CSM, I also think that Peloton, either directly or indirectly, has actually created some of the best influencers or ambassadors for
totally.
their own product, who now also have sponsorships or partnerships with other companies too.
That's right.
So they're kind of on this whole next level of like, they are the biggest Peloton fans, but on top of it, they're also doing these other cool things. Like you mentioned Cody, and I know I've seen him in an ad. And
Yep.
I'm forgetting for what exactly off the top of my head, but I know I've seen him just like there. I'm like, that's a Peloton instructor.
Yeah.
Like, I don't ride, but I know who he is, and I know like I can put all the pieces enough together to get there. So I think it's cool how they've done that.
I love it. So maybe one day we'll see some CSMs in TV commercials. You never know. So
That's Gainsight, Gainsight Super Bowl ad
I love
right
it. Let's do
there.
it. Bring it next
CSM.
year.
Hey, it'll be the year of B2B and crypto, pretty much.
I love it.
Um, to wrap up, because I know we're coming close on time, what are the three community trends in B2B SaaS that you're most excited about in 2022 and beyond?
Yeah. So three things I love. First one is your title. I love the idea of community-led growth being a strategy that people think about from day one, right? And really proactively, like we talked about, not just adding it on later, but literally it's our growth strategy from day one. And again, I don't think Gainsight was magic. We did it out of necessity, but I'm seeing people now from the beginning saying, hey, the greatest companies are being formed based on community-led growth from the beginning. So that's baking it in from day one. There's no better way to do it than that. So to me, that's the number one. Second thing is in the community, really, really focus on helping people in their careers. That to me, that's a big part of it is if you're in B2B, you're not selling to companies, you're selling to human beings. And at work, what do human beings want? A big chunk is their career. So a lot of communities are not just about like in Gainsight communities, we do tons of stuff on like navigating your career, finding new jobs. We help advertise jobs. We're just like really trying to help people as human beings, not just as business people. We actually use the term human first business at Gainsight. It's sort of our culture. And so the idea of human first community, it's not your community isn't a bunch of users, it's a human beings, right? Not a user community, it's a human community. So I would say human first community would be my second big trend. And I think what third trend, which I think is something that's going to emerge over time, is really trying to blend the digital experiences people have. Because I think what happens is community, as we talked about, isn't really just like one place, right? It's not like, oh, it's your forum is your community. You also have your Slack group. By the way, there's also like when you go through training and maybe knowing what other people are going through training at the same time. And even when you're reading like an article on how to use a product, it'd be nice to talk to other people about it. And so blending all the digital experiences together you have about a product, kind of like Peloton's done, so that community is embedded in everything you do. Instead of community being a place to go, community is embedded in everything. So the third trend would be embedding community into all your digital experiences.
Okay, you just gave me a really interesting idea, and I hope someone tries this before I get hopefully the fortunate point where I can start my own company of having an onboarding cohort for customers instead of employees, but doing that for customers to get that same sense of community from day
Yes.
one. And then
Yeah.
from there, you kind of like break out into your, oh, you're like an enterprise customer. So you kind of go down this path. You're mid-market, you go down here. You're SMB, you go down here. But you can still have that like first day, 2 days or so of
Yep.
like, we're all in this together and like, this is our onboarding program and this is our cohort. So that would be really cool. Now I'm really intrigued by
It's
that.
interesting that you said that, Joel, because like we just two data points on that. So we in the early days of our company, we would actually have our customers come on like once a month. The new customers would come to like our site and do an onboarding in person. And we created kind of this cohort community. It was just like kind of random, but accidental. And then we actually also at our events, one of the things we do when our executive events, we break people up into these groups. And then they, for a couple of days, they're together in this group of 8 to 10 people, and they kind of often will then meet on as a cohort on an ongoing basis. So I love the cohort idea. I think that's spot on.
Okay, now I'm more curious and want to have a whole nother episode on just those,
Let's
and
start
how
next
that's
time.
all works.
Sounds great.
Hey, you heard it first, everybody. There'll be a next time.
Awesome.
So I know, unfortunately, we are coming close on time. So Nick, thank you so much for being on the Community-Led Growth Show today. If people want to follow and or connect with you after listening to the episode, what are the best channels and or handles for them to do so?
Yeah. So NRMEHTA is Twitter, Nick Mehta on LinkedIn. And then, Gainsight, check out our website if you want to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joel.